Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We are the COBOL Working Group of the Open Mainframe Project, and we have lots of exciting things to tell you about today. So let's get to it. First, let me introduce the COBOL Working Group, founded a long time ago, last year, in September of last year. Cameron Seay is our co-chair of the group, and he has been leading the effort to educate young people about mainframes and COBOL. He's currently growing the programs at both East Carolina University and Tennessee State. Derek Britton is our other co-chair. He has worked on, helped build, take to market, support, and evangelize COBOL for 30 years. He works for Micro Focus. Phil Teplitsky has more than 45 years of experience as a CIO, a CTO, a corporate executive, and even graduate school faculty. Reg Harbeck is our deep mainframe nerd. He's a COBOL aficionado and team member from Canada. Gagan Kakar has more than 25 years of mainframe experience across various industries and companies, and most recently at Infosys. Len Santalucia is CTO of IBM business partner named Vicom Infinity, based in New York, and he is chair of the Open Mainframe Project's governing board. So we're quite fortunate to have him join our team. And I'm Misty Decker with 30 years of mainframe experience. I currently work at Micro Focus and evangelizing mainframe modernization, and I'm your guide to today's COBOL adventure. So with a big vision, let's review our agenda. We are a very experienced team with lots of energy, so you shouldn't be surprised to learn that we have made a lot of progress already in the few short months of our existence. So today we want to ensure you leave this session with a clear understanding of what COBOL is and isn't, why it matters, so you can help us on our mission. And we'll let you know what we're working on and what's coming next. So let's start by giving Len a chance to address a question we hear all the time. Hey, Len, isn't COBOL dead? No one still uses an old language from the 50s, right?
Don't get me started. Otherwise, we'll never get done with this session. But anyway, thank you, Misty. It is very much alive and kicking. If we were to turn off Google and Facebook and Twitter, the world would keep on ticking. If you turned off all the mainframes running COBOL, we'd have a very serious situation on our hands. It'd be apocalypse now. But I'll tell you that, it's worth noting that if you didn't know, COBOL was designed by and remains managed by an independent authority. It is not owned by anybody. And it's very many doubtless to say that, worth restating all of this is very much worth the thing to do here. The programming language of COBOL as of 2020 into its is in its seventh decade. It's easy for me to say, of loyal service to the IT community. Depending on where you set the original date, it's about 61 years old and was invented back in September of 1959. At that time, I was 6 years old. Since then, it was always been a widespread, it is very much a widespread use in its core IT business systems language. What is COBOL? Well, a few statements to remind us. COBOL runs the systems of record application at tens of thousands of organizations. As indicated by the slide here, I've been involved with the Wall Street firms, and I can definitely tell you for the last 40 years of my career, that is very much still the same as it was when I first started with IBM in the late 70s. It supports banking, insurance, transportation, government, retail, healthcare, automotive, and many other sectors of the global economy. comprises hundreds of billions of lines of application code worldwide and remains overwhelmingly strategic with 92% rate from the marketplace in 2020. And it's worth noting, if you didn't know, COBOL was designed by the remains managed by an independent authority. It is now owned by anybody. While there are differences, you could perhaps argue that it is one of the first open projects ever, long before the word open systems was even considered a term. So to recap here for you, there are over 100 separate articles published on this topic, over 5 million social media impressions demonstrating a very active community conversation around COBOL, and very popular COBOL Facebook user group now has a membership surpassing over 17,000 users. A large outpouring of continued support for this legendary language by the COBOL and mainframe communities, Misty.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Len. So Cam, Len tells us that COBOL is still in use, but is it really all that important anymore? What would happen, say, if their COBOL suddenly disappeared?
Well, Mr., to say the very least, without COBOL, the global economy as we know it would not exist. COBOL's uses and value in a wide range of industries and government departments make it a hugely vital component of how many economies run. To give you some idea, you can find for yourself public information about how much of our daily lives and business is driven by COBOL applications. For example, you can find all of the following information in various press articles, and the numbers are pretty staggering. 70 to 80% of all business transactions worldwide are written in COBOL. 60 million patients are cared for daily with COBOL programs. 95% of all ATM transactions are processed using COBOL. 96% of all vacations booked daily use COBOL programs. The Social Security Administration has about 60 million lines of COBOL code in use. The IRS has about 50 million lines of COBOL code in use. 80% of point of sales transactions are processed with COBOL programs. As for the validity of this data, it's gathered from Gartner, Laserfiche, Micro Focus, and other reliable sources. Some of the information is from some time ago, but even with some adjustments, this is an overwhelming indicator of COBOL's enduring usage and value. One of the most widely quoted stats of all is about how much COBOL code there is. The last attempt to quantify this was in the 1990s, and the figure was about 240 billion lines of code. You'll hear later on about the work of our team in trying to quantify this number again. It has been a hugely valuable exercise, but I won't give away any more spoilers right now.
Oh, well, thank you for not spoiling the surprise, Cam. I appreciate that. So, Reg, you get the next leading question. Surely something this important everyone understands and appreciates, right? Especially in the press and universities.
Thank you, Misty. Well, you would think that that would be the case. And it's fascinating to note that, in fact, right from its very inception, COBOL has been put down by those who are not involved with it. We see this interesting quote right at the beginning. June 1960, COBOL wasn't even GA yet, and people are already saying, oh, we don't think COBOL is going to be around past the end of the decade. One of the problems with COBOL is it has that issue of being the ultimate non-squeaky wheel, very similar to so much of the legacy platforming that COBOL runs on, that it just sits there and runs so well that there aren't any disasters that are related to COBOL that cause people to notice it and talk about it and say, oh, wow, it's doing a lot of stuff. And so on the one hand, since 1960, when COBOL went GA, it has basically been running the world economy increasingly, that there has been so little awareness of it by those who weren't directly involved in it. And instead, it sort of became synonymous in the public discourse with something old, antiquated, out of date, just because there wasn't a lot of discussion, even though it's been keeping quite current and functional and active. And so we see at the beginning of the pandemic, suddenly everybody wanted to once again scapegoat COBOL, claiming that it was the reason for this problem, that problem, the other problem, unemployment checks, that sort of thing. And that's one of our challenges in COBOL is that as much as it really is a going concern, it just does not have the visibility that we might be looking for. And so that's one of the reasons, I guess, that's a good thing we're finally starting to talk about it and saying, hey, this is a language that really matters. Back to you, Misty.
Well, thank you, Reg. I think it's really interesting to note that there's a Facebook group dedicated to COBOL, and it has over 20,000 users. So it's obviously still in use and engaged with today. So let me jump into where we came in, the COBOL Working Group and the Open Mainframe Project. We set ourselves up to tell the truth about COBOL. We want to restate its value, its popularity, its usage, so that there's a clear understanding of this technology. Now, we already mentioned billions of lines of code in production, and actually that's not an easy thing to measure. And the last estimate was quite some time ago. So we decided the first thing to do was to get some more up-to-date view on how much there really is. So Phil, we needed to find out more. How did you go about figuring that out?
Thank you, Misty. I appreciate your handoff. What we did was conduct a survey of the COBOL market to determine what people's opinions were, how big the market was, and some other issues regarding how they perceived they would deal with the, as Reg so adequately said, the coming concerns that they had about COBOL. We looked at things like, how are you going to educate the next generation of programmers? We looked at things like, do you perceive there's a problem? So we issued a very comprehensive survey to a very large cadre of COBOL users, and then conducted over several months very detailed analytics of what those responses were. So we both identified the issues that they had and then looked at the cross correlations between issues based on the type of company they were, their role within the company, and the size of the company. So we took both the demographics of the people we surveyed and we took the detail of the answers they gave and came up with our analytics and then turned them into visualizations that people could use. As a follow-on, we're going to conduct a series of phone interviews with the people who were kind enough to volunteer for that, to delve into very detail about the issues that they identified and see how they're doing. A phone interview gives you a better opportunity to go into depth and find out how they deal with specific issues that we've identified as being important. Mm-hmm. At the end of this process, we are going to do two things. We're going to publish our results so people understand and know what we did. And we're going to create an action plan for how to meet those issues. And I think the combination of the detailed analytics and survey that we did and the call for the forward action plan will well serve the COBOL community and give us a roadmap for going forward.
Wow. Okay, great. So much work has been done. Thank you very much, Phil. Okay, Derek, we've completed the survey. We're all in suspense. What have we learned?
Good question, Misty. Quite a lot is the answer. So let me just try and quickly outline where we are in the time available. So first of all, the sample was several hundred responses. We have had to make some assumptions about the proportion of those responses versus the size of the market as the basis for some of our calculations, some of our estimates. But as Phil was talking about, to analyze the data, we also had some help from the Watson School of Engineering at Bingham University, someone who has experience in this analysis and visualization. And our thanks go to them, as well as to Phil himself, for leading the analysis work. Here's a really short summary of what we found so far. First of all, a continued reliance on COBOL, with billions and billions of lines still in use. I'll come back to that. With widespread usage of the language across many key industries, but also some question marks about the future resourcing of COBOL applications in the future. So I want to colour in a couple of those details really quickly for you. So on the next slide, please. So here's that headline we wanted to share. Here's the kind of number that we've perhaps been waiting for. Now remember, this is based on our extrapolations, based on the data we have. It's based on a specific sample, but it is the most up-to-date and accurate estimate that the industry has seen in a while regarding COBOL. So while all caveats apply, we're calling 250 billion lines of production code out there today. I'm just going to pause for a second and say it again, 250 billion lines of code. So remember in the 90s, that estimate, and it was an estimate, was around 240 billion. So no one was quite sure at that time how real that was, or whether or not it had quietly slipped away in the meantime. Well, here's the news. It seems like this stuff hasn't gone away at all. In fact, it's increased very slightly. Now, where is it? Well, the sectors giving us the most data, the most responses, and indeed the most code was financial services, government, and interestingly also the software industry itself, and elsewhere too, as you can see here. I'm showing a pie chart for financial services, but you have users who have well over 1 billion lines of code in a single organization, probably much larger in many cases. But as you can see, it's spread across other industries too. Now on the next slide, critically, with an eye on the future, what we also wanted to do was to check and ask about the likely continued usage of COBOL and COBOL applications. You know, is it carrying on into the future? We asked a few questions around this actually, but a key data point here is that well over half the responses across all of the sectors that we got responses from are saying that applications are effectively here to stay. Either 6 to 10 years projection or usually more than a decade. So a huge strategic future reliance on COBOL is the answer for the majority of cases. And as you can see here again for financial services, which is the example I've just chosen, I think it illustrates here the future importance of COBOL very, very well. Now on the next slide, a related topic regarding the future and the question that Phil mentioned, that about skills. Do we have the right resources to support the future of COBOL? And that skills challenge is real, so this data tells us. And the blue line is what you should be looking at here on this chart. They are those who see a skills challenge today. And what we did is we broke it down by size of organization. So we wanted to see whether it was relative to team size. And not so much is the short answer. Indeed, the very largest and the very smallest organizations have less of a challenge with skills, but project a future challenge. It seems to suggest that COBOL continues to be, COBOL continues to be used, the need to train future COBOL staff is going to become a more and more important question. Of course, that's not an issue specific to COBOL, but it is an important point for those who use it. And of course, it's something that the OMP COBOL teams are looking to help address in the future. Now, we could look at these findings all day, and I'd love to, and I'm sure we will in the future, but that's all I have time for, so back to you, Misty.
Well, thank you, Derek. It's very, very interesting to see how the estimate of the number of lines of COBOL have not changed significantly in 20 years. That is a massive statement that I think will be surprising to many people. It's not surprising that skills is an issue and continues to be an issue. And that is part of the reason why we as the COBOL Working Group sponsored 2 students through the OMP mentorship program. They've done a couple of projects for us. First was Josh Fogus. He took the existing a COBOL course, open source course through the Open Mainframe project, and modified it so that students could do the labs on a laptop, even without internet access. We learned the hard way last year that many students in countries such as India and Brazil do not have access to reliable internet at home. So Josh's work will enable them to download the materials while they're on campus or some other public place with internet, and then take the laptop and the coursework back at home and learn COBOL without internet connection. Now, Sudhanshu's project presented a unique challenge. And I want to say that when people say COBOL is old, what they're really thinking about are those applications. COBOL is only a couple of years older than Seay, and you don't see people writing headlines about Seay being so old that it's a major issue for the country. So it's really those applications that need work. And so we asked Sudhanshu to demonstrate how to do that. So we gave him a demo application of a monolithic banking application, and we asked him to use industry standard modernization techniques to refactor that code in a way to enable APIs, and he built a new modern user interface into that existing code. He's documented that process and the results, and he's been presenting at multiple conferences already. And both he and Josh are presenting here this week at the Open Mainframe project. They have exceeded, both Josh and Sudhanshu have exceeded our expectations. So I'll give a little shout out to the two of them. They've done a fantastic job, and they are both very interested in pursuing and staying in mainframe and pursuing mainframe careers. So please connect with them. Their LinkedIn connections are here. They are future leaders of our space. So I hope you connect with them. So here we are. Clearly, this small team of passionate mainframers and COBOLers are off to a great start, but there's a lot more work to be done. As you saw, Josh and Sudhanshu have completed their projects and they're presenting this week. I also want to give out a big shout out to Angus Chow of Watson School of Engineering at SUNY Binghamton, who helped us do the analysis of the survey and conduct the phone interviews. But I want to remind you that our mission is to change hearts and minds. There's nothing wrong with COBOL. There is a perception issue here, and there's an application problem where those applications need updating. So we will be taking these projects, both of the student projects and the survey results, and sharing the story much more broadly to the world. And we're counting on all of you to reshare, retweet, amaze everyone with these COBOL facts at your next dinner party by working together as an open mainframe community, telling your colleagues we can dispense with the massive misinformation out there and enable COBOL to continue to serve our global economy. So thank you for joining us today. Please consider learning more and joining our work group at the link on the chart. And I do believe we're now going to take some questions.